Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Apostate, and I make videos talking about leaving Islam and other related topics. Today's today's live stream is going to be a reaction to a couple of videos by Mufti Menk, a very popular Muslim preacher that a lot of people seem to like. And I don't particularly know him. I know of him, but today I just want to go through a couple of videos of his where he talks about issues that pertain to Muslim women. Before we begin, happy holidays to anyone who celebrates. I know that today is Christmas. And yeah, I myself, I didn't really get up to much these holidays. Yesterday I had a dinner with a friend, but today, I have no tree or anything like that. So it's a pretty regular day for me. But I hope that you're enjoying with family, with friends, and, you're celebrating the way that you like. So, yeah, back to the topic. The videos that we're going to watch today, this is one of the reasons that people find it very difficult to leave or even question Islam, is that preachers have answers that sound good enough sometimes, but they're really not all that great when you think about it for more than a minute. It just sounds like there's enough in religion to keep you satisfied, to answer your question, to answer your doubt, and then move on to the next topic and don't think too hard about it. But I don't like doing that. I like to think very hard about things, and I like to think critically about them. So that's what we're going to do together today. So I invite you to watch along with me. That's what we're going to do together. If you have any comments that you would like me to include or take note of, now would be the time to leave them in the live chat as we're watching together. I appreciate audience participation. And even if you're watching after the fact, feel free to leave a comment. That's always appreciated. So without further ado, let me pull up on the screen the first video that we're going to watch today. Marrying a Career Woman, Mufti Menk. Sorry, Mufti Menk, not Mufti Abu Menk. That's Mufti Abu Layth. I'm thinking of two different people.
I'm looking to get married, okay? So I've done a fiqh course in marriage. And my ustad, he was saying to the brothers, men don't want to marry career-minded women. And to me, it seems a bit like you're demotivating those women, because how do you know what the intention of those women are? For example, I want to be a psychologist because I know that anxiety and depression is very common in the Muslim community, and only Allah knows my intention. Now, having brothers say that basically, oh no, you working is not good for my religion and not good for my children. What's wrong with that? I don't get it. What's wrong with career-minded women?
MashaAllah, Jazakumullah khair.
So before he answers, I just want to say that I feel for this woman. It sounds like she's frustrated. It sounds like she's trying to make the religion make sense. She even mentioned that she took a course, and this is kind of common, and maybe that should be the topic of a future video. It's common these days that Muslims would take courses, or some Muslims would take courses to learn about the religion better. Sometimes these are even paid courses, and there's a question of how ethical it is. People are signing up for it voluntarily, but sometimes they're voluntold to sign up for it by other family members or because they feel like they need to do better. So anyway, she signed up for a course, and she's demotivated by how the man in the video, in the course, was talking about how many Muslim men don't like career-oriented women. And it saddens me that she had to even justify why she's career-oriented or why she cares about her career. She even said they don't know people's intentions. So implying that you have to have good intentions to have a career, or you have to have a career to fulfill a particular greater purpose for the ummah or for your community or for anyone around you or for yourself or for God, for it to then be justified. Like, she's trying to make excuses for herself instead of just saying, I want to have a career. Why are Muslim men in my space, being so demotivating, and why are they discouraging us to do that? Anyway, let's hear his answer. He says a couple of filler words that are mashallah, jazakumullah khair. They always do that, and then he gets his answer.
My sister, I think the scholar who might have said that is probably speaking about himself, because I know of many brothers who are sitting right here, right now, whose wives are well within their careers, and probably even supporting them, and they share the burden and the load and so.
Okay, I want to point this out. The animation that you're seeing on screen, so the answer is from a question that he was asked on a stage. I don't know the event exactly. The animation came after the fact. So this is a clip and someone animated it. I'm assuming with his consent and everything. And I just want you to focus on how much worse the animation makes everything seem. It's even worse than his words. Like, for example, here he's saying, I know a lot of men who are okay with their wives working even by their side. And then you have a woman in a niqab where you can't see anything except her eyes, because that is the ideal that they want to project, that the people who animated this want to project. This is what a good woman should be like. She has to be dressed this way. She has to, obey her husband. And since her husband is okay with it and she's working with him, that's all lovely and great. But he didn't really say, oh, well, I think that you have the right to work as a woman. He didn't say that. He say, I know a lot of Muslim men who work with their wives, and it's great. Anyway, let's continue.
So I don't think we can say blanket that, brothers do not like women with a career. But maybe we can say there are brothers who may not like, it's their liking, their preference, and there are brothers who don't mind, for example. And I think as the years are passing, more and more people are beginning to understand that if your spouse and yourself, if you have to work within a good environment that is acceptable to both of you, it might even help in other ways. Sometimes there.
Wait, before we get to that part, notice the words, if it's acceptable to both of you, if it's a good environment. So they always throw out these examples of, you don't want your wife working in a place where she is harassed, where she's unsafe, and you as a husband should have a say in that. And to some extent, I get that. But it's not that it goes both ways and both people have to be comfortable with their spouse where they work. In Islam, a wife can't tell her husband, hey, you can't work at that workplace anymore, unless it's haram stuff, unless he's doing something that God does not allow, then maybe. I'm sorry, I don't know if you can hear that. One of my cats is destroying the litter box right now. My brother, just go for the litter. He just loves to scratch on the sides. Anyway, back to the point. He doesn't say that the explicit part, which is the husband has to allow it to happen and he has to be okay with your working conditions. And that means, say, for example, there are men and women in the same office. A husband in Islam has the right to say, well, no, you can't work there. And I want to make this explicitly clear. I know a lot of Muslims, my own family included, where women do have careers. I'm not saying every Muslim household, has a woman that's locked up and she can't have a career. But Islamically, what God allows the husband to have a right over his wife, a husband can veto where his wife works or whether she leaves the house at all. But he's phrasing it as they both have to be comfortable with the conditions. Let's hear it again, because I don't think that's the best way to phrase it.
And that if your spouse and yourself, if you have to work within a good.
If you have to work within a good environment, have to. So not if you want to, if you really have to.
Good environment that is acceptable to both of you.
That is acceptable to both of you. Again, that's not actually the rule. The wife can't really veto what her husband does unless it's haram, then maybe she can complain. But if it's not haram, he could do whatever he wants. A husband can prevent his wife from working anywhere.
It might even help in other ways. Sometimes there is a lot of boredom that occurs if a woman is just to sit doing nothing. It could help in that way. And another.
I don't know who animated this, but a woman shopping at home because she's bored. I think I know a lot of women who might watch this and kind of take offense to how caricaturized and simplified their lives are. But what do you expect? You lock a woman up at home, she can't work, and then you sort of backhandedly comment on how she's just going to be shopping all day because women going to be women. I feel like I got that that vibe from Muhammad in his hadiths, where he talks about how women backbite, women, as in gossip, women get jealous, and he keeps highlighting these negative traits. And I feel like, well, you put them in a certain situation, like in the case of Muhammad, you have over 10 wives and concubines. Of course, they're going to gossip. Of course, they're not going to like each other sometimes, or they're going to be jealous. Like it's not that big of a deal. So it's like creating the conditions where a wife would be home alone, bored, and shopping, and then showing this in the animation is like, see what happens when women get bored. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too far into it, but this is such a sad depiction.
That occurs if this woman is just to sit doing nothing. It could help in that way. And another thing is you could assist also with the burden of the livelihood and the living, because it's not cheap anymore. Obviously, if the career, like sometimes you have a job, male or female, if your spouse is not comfortable with the job you have, I think the two of you can discuss it, and maybe you want to make adjustments in order to give.
Okay. Listen to the words and also look at the animation. So he says, if you can both of you discuss it. Again, that's kind of BS. I don't know if Mufti Menk is doing this intentionally or not, but he's sugarcoating it a lot. It's not just a discussion that goes both ways. If the husband says no, then Islamically it is no. And no amount of complaining she could do to her parents, his parents, a judge can change that. At the end of the day, it's his say Islamically. But he's saying it's a two-way discussion. You both have to be comfortable. I don't think that's true. And then look at the negotiation that they're having here.
You have, I think the two of you can discuss it, and maybe you want to make adjustments in order to give preference to your marriage.
You want to make adjustments in order to give preference to your marriage. Again, the quiet part here is that your marriage means your husband and what your husband wants. You make adjustments as in you do whatever he wants. I mean, look at the way
And
that it's
another thing
animated.
is you could assist also with the burden of the livelihood and the living, because
So he uses the money as a justification, as, okay, maybe you can work because life is expensive.
it's not cheap anymore. Obviously, if the career, like sometimes you have a job, male or female, if your spouse is not
And the husband is like, but who's going to do the dishes if you go to work? Holy crap, you can't make this up. That's what the animation is.
comfortable with the job you have,
If your spouse is not comfortable, who's going to do the dishes?
I think the two of you can discuss it.
And she's like, I'm going to do the dishes. I'm
And
going to
maybe you
do
want to make
the ironing
adjustments in order to.
and the cooking. I mean, this is animation. I'm reading into it, but I don't see here her pointing at him and being like, well, how about you do the dishes sometimes and I'll do the cooking and we can, figure this out. She's like, well, I got this handled. I got that handled. Now am I allowed to work, daddy, husband?
To give preference to your marriage over the exact place where you might be working, because sometimes it does happen.
You hear that? Like he's still in the answer. He's saying, unless your marriage calls for it, and by your marriage, again, that's a stand-in word for your husband, unless your husband decides so, then in that case, well, there's nothing you could do.
Your marriage over the exact place where you might be working, because sometimes it does happen. Even with the brothers, the wife is not comfortable because of what goes on at your workplace or something. You need to talk about it, discuss it, and maybe make realistic changes if needed. So
Again, it's a very vague, like, if you're uncomfortable with where he works, you can have a discussion about it, but that's it. Like you can't veto anything. But if your husband is uncomfortable, or for the sake of the marriage, he can decide that you can't work.
So I don't think it's right for someone to just issue a statement on behalf of all the males to say that they prefer this and they prefer that, because men prefer all different things.
Pause and focus on that sentence. So the question is about, her wanting to have a career, and she has what she thinks is a very good reason to have a career, because she wants to help people. She wants to be a psychologist. And his answer boils down to, well, it's an overgeneralization of that scholar to say that all men prefer non-working women, because men have different preferences. So the answer to her question about a woman's career is men prefer different things. You can't make this up. Men prefer different things.
What I prefer, someone else might not. And what someone else prefers, I might not. And that's what makes the world a lovely place.
You see how he puts a spin on it? The diversity in men's preferences is what makes the world a lovely place. I mean, you hear this guy, you hear the inspirational music in the background if you're into that kind of thing, and you're like, oh, wait, he has a point. The world is such a beautiful place. SubhanAllah, mashallah, jazakumullah khair, all that kind of stuff. But actually listen to what he's saying. He's saying, well, men prefer different things. So hopefully you find a Muslim man who's okay with you having a career, as long as it doesn't interfere with the dishes and the laundry and everything. And that's the progressive answer. again, I don't know if he's being intentionally misleading about what the real answer is, which is it's up to your husband or the man of the house, or if he's truly trying his best to be progressive and he's saying, well, the world's changing and some men are okay with that. But at the end of the day, he doesn't give a clear answer to say your right to work, your right to determine what to do with your life is yours as a woman. And of course, you should have a discussion with your husband about it, just like his right to work and his right to do what he wants with his life is his, but you have to be considerate of your partner. But he doesn't really affirm her right. He says, well, I hope you find a man that allows you to work. Anyway, that's the first video. Is there anything left here?
Because Allah's made us all different. We will fit in somewhere by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
The animated woman is happy, so it's all good. Well, let me read a couple of chats and then I'll get back to the next video. Stop Scamming Man, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, in the video, is nail polish halal? Mufti Menk. He warns that if a woman paints her nails, it renders her in danger of being possessed by Satan if she farts from the wudu, not wetting the whole hand. I haven't watched the video. I'm going to take it at face value that this actually is something that he said, because this is not the first time that I've heard this. And this is not, again, some kind of fringe cult that happens to, call themselves Muslim. I've heard opinions like these a lot before, and so have a lot of girls and women. So me relaying this is for, you to be aware that this is something that a lot of Muslim women go through, this kind of brainwashing or fear mongering. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Chevro Goldo, thank you so much for the super chat and says, just a big thank you for all your work, Aladdin. Appreciate it. Again, Stop Scamming Man, thanks for the super chat. Normally, apologists crow that Islam makes people care less about possessions, yet they spin on a dime and make a huge deal out of stuff Muslim men are supposed to provide their wives when concerned about their rights arise. That's a good point. So I want to point out, we're going to go over a verse in a hadith after the next video, but that's something that women are always told in Islam, that they have rights, right? That Allah has assured them rights, and even that Muhammad to some extent was a feminist, even though a lot of Muslims hate that word feminist, but was someone who cared about women's rights and was so much better than what was the commonplace, or the norm before him. And he made things better for women, which I disagree, but even if he did make a difference and made things better, progress doesn't stop with him. Things have become even better since after Muhammad, and not because of him. But anyway, one of the things that they affirm as rights that women have are the husband providing for them. And on face value, that seems like a great idea. Wow, a woman is a queen, she must be provided for. But it's also a financial trap, because if you have no marketable skill, or if you're not allowed to work, or if your husband doesn't let you, or if you haven't built up the confidence and courage and experience needed to work or experience being part of society that's not just someone who's provided for, then that is a trap. Then the man that you're with, who pays for your bills, whether it be your father or your husband, he gets to dictate everything. And you sort of sign that contract implicitly by being a Muslim woman, because men have that dominance over the women. They give them their rights, and then the rights that they have over them includes whether or not they're allowed to leave the house, whether or not they're allowed to work, and things of that nature. So it seems like a nice little bonus that, oh, you get a paycheck for being a Muslim woman. Well, it comes with a lot of strings attached, of course. But anyway, we'll get to that later. Let's watch the next video, also by Mufti Menk, or part of a lecture that he gave. And let's put it up on screen.
Point number one.
It's called How to Be the Best Wife in Islam. It's a bit long, it's 15 minutes, and it's a little outdated. It's from 2019, but his opinions, have been pretty much the same since then, I assume. I don't think he's changed his tone at all. And this video is very popular. So,
point number one, and we need to know this: a believing female is focused. She is focused. She has focus. Focus upon what? Focus upon the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She is focused upon the goal that she has, which is to earn Jannah, to earn paradise. She knows that this life is absolutely temporary. And she knows that she can go any minute. She can go to now, or she can go within the next 5 minutes, or within the next 5 years.
So I want to comment on this first. I don't know the context, whether he was talking about how to be the best a Muslim, because he was talking to a bunch of women or giving a lecture in a hall where there are women present. So he's directing it to the women. So instead, you could say to be the best Muslim man. It's also a lot of the same stuff that he's talking about in the beginning. Like, to be a good Muslim man, you have to focus on pleasing Allah and doing things for the sake of Allah, and on the afterlife, which is something that seems so spiritual and possibly fulfilling for some people, and I find it to be scary that the focus of your life should be what happens after you die. Again, if that helps you make your life a bit better and the lives of people around you better, that's good. But it also involves believing deeply in a lot of fictional events and a lot of terrifying events, and living your life in a certain way that may be harmful to yourself just to please this God and to attain heaven and not go to hell. So it's a bit of fear mongering, but let's keep listening.
Years or 50 years. So she knows that it is important for her to prepare for the day that she is to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is her focus. Whatever she does, she asks herself, will this please my maker? Will this be something that will earn the pleasure of my maker, or will it be earning the wrath of my maker? Or an abaya, this is what I'd like, with everything bling bling on it, subhanallah. If that is our focus, then we will be so happy and so excited when we have those accessories and that handbag and that.
Again, the infantilizing. So he's saying your focus should be on how to please Allah, and not just that, how to avoid his wrath. Again, with the fear mongering. And then talks about women's abayas. So for those of you who don't know, in the Gulf countries, I don't know if it's still a law, but back when I lived in Saudi Arabia, it was definitely a law. A woman cannot be outside in regular clothes, no matter how covered up she is. She has to wear on top like a black abaya, like a black sheet of clothing. I don't know how else to describe it. And she doesn't necessarily have to cover her face or her hair completely, but she has to at least have that draped over her. Actually, don't quote me on that. I don't know if it's a law, but it's something that everyone followed in Saudi Arabia, and it's something that is still common today. So some women like to sort of bedazzle their abayas, or there has emerged, a market for nicer or more up style abayas that are more expensive or fancier. Just like you see the men wearing their traditional thobes. There's also expensive thobes that don't look that different from the outside, but there are differences. So he's talking about how when you bedazzle your abaya, that is when you buy one with a bit of bling on it, that is a bad thing, because the whole point of it is to make men not look at you, or to not entice men to look at you. So if you're wearing something shiny or something colorful in any way, you're grabbing men's attention. Again, treating men like animals, or specifically Muslim men, as if they have no self-control, as if they're not human, as if they're animal first, human second, and having no trust in them having any self-control or any sort of moral framework, except that God said don't do it, and the women have to hide because of it. But anyway, he's saying it may seem like a little, not that big of a deal to buy a fancy abaya or an abaya with some color or bling on it, but do you want to go to hell over that?
Mobile phone and those shoes, and we can walk. We have those accessories and that handbag and that mobile phone and those shoes, and we can walk with that figure, with that, subhanallah, abaya looking so beautiful, jump into that car and go into that home, and it makes us so happy, not realizing what did you do for Jannah, because Allah's given you 5 more minutes to spend with those items. Now what?
It's funny how they put these stock footage of I don't know, animals or scenery in the background, as if this is some deep, meaningful realization instead of actually what it is. I mean, let's hide the screen for a second and just listen to his voice and listen to what he's talking about. Take away all the beautiful imagery.
That home, and it makes us so happy, not realizing what did you do for Jannah, because Allah's given you 5 more minutes to spend with those items. Now what?
It's just fear mongering. It's guilt tripping. He's saying, you're happy about your pretty abaya, enjoy it for the next 5 minutes because you're gonna die, and then you're gonna go to hell. Now what? Don't try to make it look pretty with I don't know what else to show on screen, but it feels very disingenuous of them to put all this stuff as if this is some sort of deeper, meaningful speech that he's got there. It is brainwashing.
Like I always say, how many people want Jannah? Put up your hand. Everyone.
How many people want heaven?
Who wants to die now? Put up your hand. No one. How are you going to go to Jannah?
Well, I want to point something out. Who wants to die right now? I'm sure there are some people, I've actually heard some people say, I would love to die right now and go meet God and go to heaven and meet, my dead relatives and all that kind of stuff. But there's also that uncertainty that even if you're a Muslim, even if you do everything by the book as well as you can, there's a chance that you might go to hell, that you only go to heaven because of Allah's mercy. Even if you're the best Muslim to exist, you're still going to heaven only because of Allah's mercy. It's similar to that sort of Catholic guilt, that's supposed to keep you feeling always indebted to Allah. Like even if you do everything you're supposed to, you still owe him. You still only are saved because of his mercy, not because of the merit of what you've done. So I'm not surprised that people who believe in heaven and hell and think they're doing the best to go to heaven, I don't know if everyone in that crowd is, but even if they are, they wouldn't be excited to go to such a terrifying day of judgment that they've been, scared of their whole lives or been told to be afraid of their whole lives. So yeah, I'm not surprised. I don't know what kind of deep point he's trying to make here, but yeah, people don't want to die. And that's another thing. Even if someone believes really strongly, I don't know if their belief in the immaterial things, in the metaphysical, in the afterlife will ever be as primal, as grounded, as immediate, as intense as their belief in their or their will to live, or their belief in things that they see around them. So even those who believe in the afterlife, they're still ruled by this sort of humanistic desire to not die. Otherwise, their genes wouldn't have made it. Their ancestors would have died before they were produced many, many, many generations ago. So I'm not surprised that most people in that room are not ready to die.
If you're not going to die, well, you might say, well, I don't want to die right now. Believe me, the weakness of man, no matter when death comes to him, he's always upset. But then why are you making, Ya Allah, grant me Jannah, grant me Jannah. Allah says, okay, this is your Jannah. You say, but Ya Allah, grant me a long life. I don't want to die, Ya Allah. I don't want to die, Ya Allah. So what happened to the Jannah?
Wait, this scenario that he's describing, again, he's supposed to be like crapping on humans and being like, look at how flawed we are. He's saying that Allah is giving you heaven, and yet you still want to live a long life before you go to heaven. Who on this world, aside from allegedly Muhammad and a few people that he named, is guaranteed to go to heaven? And maybe the prophets, I don't know what their deal is. But who else is guaranteed to go to heaven? This scenario has not happened that he's describing to point at humans and say, look at how flawed we are. Also, I don't know how we got here. We're supposed to be talking about women and Muslim women. But anyway, him asserting that Allah has given you heaven and yet you still want to have a long life, you greedy, greedy humans. When has that ever happened? If God can guarantee to me right now that heaven and hell exist, and I will skip hell because that's the alternative to heaven, then yeah, if you would give me a contract to go to heaven right now, I don't know if I'd want to die right away. There's still stuff that I want to do, but this opinion has never, this scenario has never actually happened, but he's using it to sort of guilt trip people, and I don't know where he's going with this.
Come on, we want to give it to you. Tuhfatul mu'min al-mawt, the gift of a true believer, is actually death, because now you're going to get what you want. It's like a child saying, oh, man, make...
See, that's the crap that makes people anxious about religion sometimes. When that hadith, I think he's quoting hadith that says, the gift of a believer is death. You know who else quotes that kind of stuff? People who are ready to die for their religion, which is usually not a good thing. You don't want people going around thinking, wow, death would be such a relief for me right now because I know I'm going to big heaven after. I'm like, you don't want people walking around thinking that. Because even if you think that's the case, I don't trust people, even if there is a heaven and hell, to take that to the right conclusions. So why are you quoting that as if that's something we should aspire to?
Me first in class. Okay, I worked so hard. I'm first in class. I need the prize. When is the prize giving? Oh, it's on Sunday in the evening. I'm not going to come. I'm not coming. Because why? I don't want to go. It's nighttime. Allahu Akbar. When are you going to get your prize? So we need to think about it carefully. Death is something you have to go through. Al-mawtu.
what sort of point was he trying to make? There's a prize giving event on Sunday night and no one wants to go. How does that apply to Muslims in any way? Anyway, let's pause here for a second because I want to read a couple of comments before we continue. The second shaitan, thank you for the super chat, says Mufti has always been a chill scaler, I don't know what that means, who supports any gender's rights, but until he joined the Dawah community, he changed only a percentage for men's favor. I don't know if I don't know him enough to ever say that I agree that at some point he was supporting all genders' rights, but you know, if that's what you say, that is what you say. Thank you for the super chat again, and thanks, Stop Scamming Man. Says those looking to upskill and escape abusive families. There's many really useful online tutorials. For instance, how to do most anything on computer programs many workplaces use. That's a good reminder. If you are stuck in a bad situation, there are ways to gain skills and escape your abusive family. So please use the internet as long as you have access to it. Bruce Wayne, thank you for becoming a member of the channel. Rain says, a lot of language used when talking about or to women seems to be patronizing. They get treated like they don't have the capacity to make their own decisions. Now you're getting it. Arwa says, I remember as a Muslim watching stuff that I didn't agree with and jumping through mental hoops and to make it work. But now that I left just watching these videos without something hanging over me, I'm glad that you no longer have to deal with that. And that's sort of why I do this. I want to walk people through who are in-betweeners or who have gone through the deconversion process or still haven't, just to give them my point of view and point out all the things that the Shaykh is not explicitly saying or the things that he's leaving out.
Death is a door and every single person is going to go through it. But the question is, have we prepared for it? Have we tried? Have we been focused upon it? Or are we just focused upon this and that and so on and so forth? Then we have the issue of purity. I believe.
Okay, before we get there. So this whole spiel about death was to say we're flawed because we're not focused on death enough. I still haven't gotten around to making that video, is Islam a cult or not? And the short answer is yes, religions are to a large extent cults. They fit the profile. But how religious one is or how much they adhere to it, how much of a member of the cult they are, that's a different topic. So is it a death cult if you focus so much on death and what happens after death? Like this guy is trying to guilt people for not thinking about death enough. This is the kind of stuff that messes with your head as a believer. Some people don't care. Somehow they go about their life. They listen to this sheikh and they're like, yeah, I should be thinking about death more. And then they just continue. But some people, this gets to them and they start thinking about death more every day. And then we wonder why, you know, people have mental health problems caused by religion. And when people do, you know, believers like to point to them and say, well, that's a you problem. That's not a religion problem. Again, this sheikh, why are you reminding us of death all the time?
Believing female is always pure. Pure in what? Pure in absolutely everything. In the way she speaks, in the way she dresses, in what? Pure in a believing female is always pure. Pure in what? Pure in absolutely everything. In the way she speaks, in the way she dresses, in her interactions, in her company, in her heart, and in her mind.
Well, I'm curious to know, again, I don't know what this was taken from. I don't know if he has a speech out there where he says, what is a pure man? A pure Muslim man is one that is pure in his, in the way that he speaks, in the way that he dresses, in his interactions, in his company. I doubt that he's ever said that, and I doubt he ever will. So let's think, what does this purity mean? So what is the opposite of a pure woman? So are women impure if they don't dress a certain way or if they don't talk a certain way? If that's what, you know, a religious leader thinks, does he think the same way about men? Is a man impure if he, I don't know, if he shows his knees, because that's where the line is in Islam? Is a man impure if he uses bad language? Is he impure? It's usually the onus is put on the women to be clean and pure, but with the men there's a bit of leeway. But yeah, the purity language gets really icky.
Purity of the heart. So the qualities are removed of jealousy, hatred, and this love of God.
Yeah. We talked about this earlier. Let's hear this again.
The way she dresses, in her interactions, in her company, in her heart, and in her mind. Purity of the heart. So the qualities are removed of jealousy, hatred, and this love of gossip, the love of sin. Everything is taken out. That's what makes it different.
Wait, is jealousy so hatred? Okay, sure. Hatred is a bad quality. Why is jealousy a bad quality? Especially when in Islam, the male jealousy is almost prescribed. If you don't have excessive jealousy, if you, as they say, let your wife wear certain things or talk in a certain way or appear a certain way, then you don't have enough ghira, you don't have enough jealousy, then you're not a man. You know, you're, and they have terms for that. So why is jealousy a bad thing for women, but a good thing for men? Again, I remind you, Muhammad had a lot of women, and yes, sometimes they get jealous of each other. And who wouldn't? If I had 11 girlfriends, I'm sure they'd get jealous of each other. I wouldn't then point to them and say, "You're jealous? That's a you problem. That's a deficiency in not just you, 11 wives or 10 or however many they were. That's a deficiency in womankind." Tell me something that sounds more incelish than that. Seriously, the guy built his opinion of women based on a crowd of women that he kept in conditions where they would be at odds with each other. That's his reference for what a woman is his wives who are jealous of each other. And then to point that at the women and say jealousy is a bad quality to have. Now, of course, I'm not saying that you should aspire to be a jealous person who doesn't like it when anyone talks to their partner in any way, or, you know, you have to be suspicious of your partner or anything of that sort. But to make it seem as if women are crazy, women are jealous, women gossip, men, they should be jealous. You know, that's their God-given right. What more proof do you need that this religion was written by a man for men? Yeah.
So she's not jealous. If another sister looks more gorgeous, she's happy. MashaAllah. Wow. Alhamdulillah, sister, Allah's blessed you. MashaAllah. Yes, I'm not jealous.
So in this scenario, she'd be jealous of another woman looking prettier than her. And again, I got to remind you, the way that a lot of Islamic cultures, because it's not just one group, but there are a lot of cultures that happen to be Muslim where you have women who are treated or supposed to be treated like daddy's princess. You know, she doesn't work. She doesn't really go out and interact with the world except with other girls like her. And then she grows into a woman. She still doesn't have a lot of, you know, actual real world experience. And she doesn't have a job. And as they depicted in the previous video, she's sitting at home, shopping online all day, gossiping. Like, what else is there to do when you don't allow women to grow their interests, to maybe have a career if they want to actually develop as a person, and you keep sheltering them and also infantilizing them? And then you point to the negative traits or the hobbies that they have, and then you say, well, that's a woman thing, that's a bad thing, as if men don't gossip, as if men don't get jealous, or that's not even the right word. Jealousy is not the right word. Envious, as if men don't get envious, as if wars haven't started over men getting envious. So it's sad to see him just point it at women and say a good woman doesn't do these things.
But those who are focused on the dunya, do you know what they would say? No way. She can't be looking better than me. Not at all. I'm not going to speak to her. Then we go around spreading rumor about her. We make life difficult for her. And then she cries and she's depressed and she becomes this and that, because neither is she focused nor are we. We're busy fighting a little battle in the dunya, not realizing that as soon as you clock the age of 40, your first wrinkle comes in. Unless you're living in Bahrain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
So the core of what he's saying, like there's a half truth to it, or a half good point that he almost makes, which is that, yeah, you shouldn't gossip about people and start rumors about them because you're envious. You shouldn't want to have what everyone else has. But then he creates this whole scenario, and he says the cure for this is for you and the girl that you're jealous of, or the woman you're jealous of, you should both focus on the afterlife. Wait, no, that's not the takeaway. The takeaway isn't, let's just not deal with societal issues that we have here, or conflicts, and just focus on the afterlife. Let's just pray, let's just pray about it. No, we live in the real world. Well, people will be envious of each other, jealous over each other. People will have conflict. So there is a healthy way to deal with that conflict, or think of yourself in that conflict as, do I want to participate in this system, or do I want to just make sure that my feelings are my own and no one can hurt my feelings? I can walk away from this. That's a healthy way to deal from it, instead of just saying, let's just all focus on the big man in the sky. Okay, there are bigger things we have to worry about. The afterlife that's going to burn all of us. Let's just all focus on that. That's not the answer here. So he starts off right, that, yeah, you shouldn't be bickering over these things. But I don't know, again, if this is appropriate to say, so here's what's wrong with women. No, this is an issue that some women have faced, as have some men. So I wouldn't say, so here's what's wrong with men. Some of you get real envious of each other and, start buying faster cars and bigger cars just to show off. We should all focus on the big fire that's coming afterwards. That's not the solution.
Allah's gift to us, that he has kept so many things in the world, but he has told a believing female and a believing male that your focus should not be the items that we have provided for you in the dunya. Many people, when they want to get married, they don't realize that what we are focused upon is actually dunya. This man don't have a salary which is good enough for me or my daughter.
Dunya means this world.
Or so on and so forth, not realizing that he's got everything else. And perhaps he might live in a hut, but he will protect your daughter in such a way that the man who's living in a castle will not do. And who knows, the one in the castle might only have 5 more minutes to live, or 5 years. Allahu Akbar. Bought the car.
It's always with these weird scenarios. So you have a poor man who's like a really good Muslim guy who's going to protect your daughter that you're giving away for marriage. And you have a man who's rich, but he might die in 5 minutes. What are you talking about? I want to point this out. Thank you for reminding me, T-Rex. I like how this dude casually calls women vain and gives the lesson that beauty is fleeting. Yeah, I don't think he thought too much about that.
As we wanted the house.
And also, I want to comment on who will protect your daughter. Again, I understand that partners should protect each other, that a man is physically stronger than a woman. So, of course, in a situation in danger, on average, I'm saying men are on average stronger than women, then yeah, it will be expected that you would protect your wife. But it's not that deep. Like the way that they phrase it, it's as if we still live in a desert where there's war going around all the time, where someone might randomly come and invade your tribe and take your wife as a concubine. Cough, cough, Muhammad, like he did that kind of stuff. But we don't live in that world anymore. Thankfully, most of us don't. There are people who still live in very unstable situations and unsafe areas, but most of the world doesn't live like that, thankfully. And that's no thanks to, in particular, Islam. It's just the way that progress has been going. So do we really want to stay in the same mindset as someone who lived in a different time, as someone who grew up in a, tribe invade tribe world? Do we want to keep those same exact wisdoms with us today, where we don't necessarily live in that world? But yes, if you live in a place where men are always predators who will try to get your daughter, try to get your wife, try to get whoever, then yes, you need men to protect women. But that's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, is it? I don't know if I have anything else to say.
Houses we wanted, the luxuries we wanted.
Let's go back to his weird hypotheticals.
And who knows, the one in the castle might only have 5 more minutes to live, or 5 years. Allahu Akbar. Bought the cars we wanted, the houses we wanted, the luxuries we wanted, the perfumes we wanted, the accessories we wanted, the abayas we wanted, whatever else we wanted. We've got all of that, but it did not bring us closer to Allah. Then we have lost. We cannot call ourselves true believers. We might be believers, but not true believers.
I wonder how applicable that is. And Muslims always say there are 1 point whatever billion Muslims, but how many of them are true believers, though? They're very selective about what a true believer is, what it matters, but when it matters to not be selective, then there are billions. Because
this hadith says, when goodness comes to the direction of a true believer, you find him thankful. It brings him close to Allah. Shakar. A shukr means a person who acknowledges the gift of Allah by worshipping Allah and obeying. That is the meaning of shukr. To thank Allah, to acknowledge from Allah by obeying his instruction. Imagine.
Oh boy, there's a lot I could say about that, but I want to read a couple of comments first. Nazon, thanks for the super chat. They say, the images remind me of the statement, look at the trees as proof of God's great strength and existence. And to some extent, that's exactly what that is. I remember very vividly from a very young age, I'd be watching like TV. I think it was even before satellite, and like my grandma's place didn't have satellite. And I remember we'd be watching this weekly or daily religious show where it was just a nature documentary in the background, footage that I had never seen before at that stage of my life, and amazing footage, and time lapses of plants growing and whatever it might be. And then a guy commentating on it with an Islamic twist. I can't remember if he was talking just about Islam or saying, subhanallah, look at this thing that Allah created. Something, it's either this or that, but it was just juxtaposed that way, just to keep it fresh in your mind. If you doubt for a second that God is real, look at all this intricacy in the world that Allah created. So even as a distraction, look at Allah's proof. But realistically, none of this proves that A, there is a God, and B, that God is Allah. If anything, this is just playing on your sense of wonder. Like, I wonder how all this came to be. And the answer that they feed you is specifically, my God created all this. Why did he create all this? So that a sheikh can start preaching after millions of years of evolution. A sheikh is going to tell a woman what to do with her hair, because that was all part of God's plan. God created this fish on the screen right now, or is it a type of shark? I'm not even sure. A stingray? God created this thing, and this was part of his plan. And it took millions of years for things to evolve, only for at the end Allah to remember and be like, oh, right, I have to send this one prophet to tell women to cover up their hair and how to be a good Homo sapien woman, female. That's insane. But yes, they try to use this to get you to think that, God did all this. So just stay focused. Hiba, thanks for the super chat. Hiba says, I'm happy I was born as a woman to obey my husband to end up in Jannah. After all my husband has done, he deserves more than 72 hur, which are the heavenly sex maidens. Hope God spares me one, since he made me a lesbian in this life. I did not see that twist coming. Well, I hope that you have the love and the relationship that you seek in this life, and if there is an afterlife there as well. The second shaitan, thanks for the super chat, says, sorry, Aladdin, maybe I'm wrong, but I'm a little disappointed with the Mufti. Not all of it, but only on inequality between males and females. I'm not even that disappointed in the Mufti specifically, because he's given Islam to work with. How progressive can you be without calling God a bigot? I don't know, quote me on that. How progressive can a Muslim be, or can a religious person be, depending on the religion, without calling their God a bigot? So if you can't point a finger at God and say, actually, I disagree with that, that's a glass ceiling that he's never breaking. Anyway, let's continue.
And someone says, oh, I thank you, Allah, but you are not dressed properly. That's not thankfulness. The other example is, imagine you give.
Oh, right. Okay, so he's talking about thankfulness and material stuff. By the way, this guy who's, crapping on women for having abayas with a little bit of color or bling or whatever, I wonder how materialistic he is. So Mufti Menk is a very, very popular sheikh. He gets invited to talk and give lectures, and I'm sure he gets paid handsomely for it. I don't know if he has a private jet. I don't know if he's that rich, but I know for a fact that he has servants at his house. For sure. There's no way it's just him and his wife doing the dishes and, equally sharing things, or just his wife. He has servants. He lives in a large house. He has at least more than one car with a driver. I bet you that. Is that guy giving away all his materialistic gain in this world that he got in the pursuit of teaching about Allah and spreading Allah's word? Does this guy live like the average person in his country or less? No, I'm sure that he has some material wealth, and quite a lot of it, I assume. Even if he's being charitable with a lot of his money, he got all of his money preaching about God. So before he can preach to women, how dare you spend some money on, pretty abayas or shopping or whatever, is he living the life that he preaches? Anyway, the point that he's making right now is that God created you. Allah specifically created you, and you have to be grateful for him so that you go to heaven. And also, just by virtue of being created, you should be grateful for him. And when you don't dress the way that God likes, when you don't do the things that God likes, you're being ungrateful. But for that to be even true, we would have had to sign the contract before coming into this life. So if I was an adult who can think for myself, who already has a personality independent of being a Muslim, and then God barters with me on that deal and says, "Hey, I'm going to bring you into life. I'm going to give you this, give you that, and in exchange, you have to obey me in order, and follow my orders." Then it's a fair deal. But to just plop life into existence and say, well, you signed up for it implicitly, now you owe me. What a whiny idea of God you have. Like, what an entitled, egotistical, obsessed God that is that you worship, Mufti, that really, really gets upset when women wear color on their abaya and is going to send them to hell for it. How silly does that make your God sound?
To acknowledge from Allah by obeying his instruction. Imagine someone says, "Oh, I thank you, Allah," but you are not dressed properly. That's not thankfulness. The other example is, imagine you give a person 1,000,000 dinars and they come back and throw eggs at your house.
Their analogies are always so bad, so bad. You give a person 1,000,000 dinars, however many dollars that is, it's a lot, and then they throw eggs at your house. But that's not at all analogous to God creating you without your consent and then being kind of mysterious about who the hell he is. Because, yeah, at the end of the day, we have to believe that a guy spoke to a guy in a cave. A guy spoke to an angel in a cave and the angel spoke to God. Why? Why is God being so coy about all this? You tell me that is analogous to a guy giving me 1,000,000 dinars in my hand and then I throw eggs at his house. There's nothing about that analogy that is similar. Nothing.
What would happen? Is that gratitude? But they've told you, thank you, really, I appreciate it. Their mouths said something, but their deeds are showing you something else. Why do we do that with Allah? When he's given you your life, your breathing, your eyes. Remember this and remember.
Citation needed.
But it carefully.
That's something that I hate it when religious preachers do this. So let's be clear right now. Aladdin, are you an atheist? Are you agnostic? What does it all mean? I'm an atheist in the sense that I don't believe this God idea, that God has a personality, that God has wants, has needs, even though Muslims don't say that he needs them, but he has preferences. He wants us to do certain things, has a will. This idea of God, that essentially being some kind of super human, which they don't acknowledge him as human, but he's like a human personality to a millionth degree. That idea I don't believe in. I think every person who's ever had that idea is a human being. That idea has never existed independent of human beings. Now, is there something beyond us? Is there a reason that we exist here? Is it all random? Was there something that started all this? I have no clue, and I don't know if we ever will. So maybe that answers that. I'm atheist, agnostic in the sense that I don't know what's beyond, but atheist in the sense that I think all gods are man-made ideas. So with that out of the way, I hate it. I hate it when someone points to the world and says, "Isn't this so amazing and intricate and wonderful?" And I and a lot of people say, "Yes, it is. I agree with you." And then they say, "Therefore, my God made this." No, hold your horses. I agree with you that this is amazing. This is wonderful. I don't know how all this came to be. I would struggle to even replicate, a fraction of what exists in this world. That does not mean, therefore, you get to say, "My God made this." That does not mean, therefore, you have to do what I say God told the other guy to tell me to do. Otherwise, you'll be tortured and you're ungrateful. That makes no sense.
What are you focused on? Ask yourself every day. Some of us are just focused on having a degree in the dunya. We're not saying that's wrong. It's important that you are educated in the dunya, but are you doing it? Are you doing that? And paying as a payment your link with Allah? If that is the case, you're at a loss.
Wait, what? Oh, he's saying, are you getting a degree at the expense of, and keep this important context in mind, he's talking to women or about women right now. So remember that clip we watched earlier about him talking about a career woman? And he's like, "Oh, well, some men are okay with that." Well, now he's the kind of guy who's not quite okay with that, because listen to the language. He's saying, if you want to get an education, that's fine. I'm not against women having an education, but is it at the expense of your relationship with God? He doesn't say that to men, does he? He would never say, men, you want to become an engineer, but do you have a good relationship with God first? No, he says that to the women. He's like, women can get an education, but first they have to make sure that they pray all their prayers and serve their husband and do the dishes, and then maybe they can get an education if the husband is okay with it. That's what he's not saying explicitly. I want to highlight this comment because it's hilarious. And thank you for the super chat. Insert channel name here. That is so generous of you. They say, does anyone know where Mufti Menk got his PhD in Japanese? With mental gymnastics and the ability to fearmonger like this, I reckon I could convince my friends to buy me a yacht. Love your work, Aladdin. Merry Christmas and happy holidays, everyone. Thanks again for the super chat. I want to remind people, Mufti Menk is not in a particular way villainous or, a terrible sheikh, or he's not some kind of exception. This is the norm in Muslim preaching. This is not necessarily done with any malice. This is not because he's a genius, deceptive person. This is the norm. I hope that that is said loud and clear. And this is what a lot of people internalize to be the norm. So when you have someone who's questioning Islam and they come across this and they're like, hey, all the comments, they seem to agree with this. He sounds somewhat okay. He's saying, yeah, women can have a career. And they take that to be the answer, as like, I don't need to leave Islam to have a career. I just need to find the right Muslims who say the right things. And that may work for you. But remember that that trap of religion can apply at any point if you happen to be in the right kind of situation. If you're around the right men who say, no, you can't work, then it is what it is. So I implore you to listen carefully to what sheikhs say, and not just Mufti Menk. He's just one of them. He's not even a particularly egregious example of them.
Your focus is not correct. But is that making you stronger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Let's listen again.
And paying as a payment your link with Allah, if that is the case, you're at a loss. Your focus is not correct. But is that making you stronger for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? If yes, then alhamdulillah, you've achieved a lot. Not realizing when rasidak lil akhirah. Where is your bank balance for the akhirah? Where is it? What has happened to it? Nobody is saying don't pack away money for the dunya, but...
So, again, I want to highlight a comment that says, I leaned towards Menk because of this. The way that he speaks is clever and makes you feel like as a woman, you have a choice. And I don't want to, every time I hear a Muslim woman say, I have a choice, I love my hijab, I love my this, I love my that, I chose this. I don't want to just shut them down and say, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Perhaps they did. But perhaps there are a lot of women, like a lot of people that I hear from, and say, I didn't even realize how much I was being led to a choice that I thought I wanted to choose, but I had no effective choice in the matter. If your choice is between going to hell and obeying Allah, you will do the thing that you do to obey Allah that gets everyone around you to approve. But it's not really that great of a choice, is it? So he's saying, yeah, you can study, you can make money, but as long as it's for the sake of Allah. And that's one thing that I want to point out. If you do good deeds in Islam, you don't just get good points because you did a good thing. It's only if you're doing it for the sake of Allah that you get points for doing a good thing. Or if you don't believe in Allah, and you do good things, it doesn't really count. In the afterlife, you're going to be condemned to hell because you didn't believe in Allah. So even here, he's saying you want to improve yourself, you want to learn, you want to work, even if it's just, not harmful to you or to the world, even if it's beneficial to you or the world, it doesn't count. It's not good for you unless you're saving up, unless you're hoarding good deeds for your bank balance for the afterlife, which is a sort of anxiety that I hope that no one here can relate to, but I know a lot of you can. This feeling like you're always bankrupt, like you're always in debt, and you really want to make sure that you have enough money to retire in the afterlife. And by money, I mean good deeds. Because, like I said, it's only by Allah's mercy that you go to heaven.
Don't give preference to it because your focus is on the akhirah. Every dinar that you have packed away for the dunya, you need to pack away good deeds worth more than that for the akhirah. Because the akhirah is everlasting. As for those dananir, they will not help you for more than another 10 to 20 years. He has absolute control of every aspect of my existence. So if I am unhappy, he owns my happiness. If I am poor, he owns my wealth. If I am sick, he owns my cure.
I'm confused. So he's saying women don't save too much money or don't focus on money, focus on the afterlife. That's what a good woman should do. And then he moves on to what was it? If I am unhappy, he owns my happiness. Like God is withholding your happiness or something. Let's hear it.
If I am poor, he owns my wealth. If I am sick, he owns my cure. I need to know this, and I need to believe in it firmly. And this is what makes me focused, and this is what belief is all about. It helps us focus.
This is what belief is all about. It helps us focus. Focus on what? Focus on... That is such a circular statement. Belief helps me focus on how grateful I need to be to Allah. So on my belief. So my belief keeps me focused on my belief. And you see how it's a circle? So if you lose focus of your beliefs, then you're not focused on your beliefs anymore. T-Rex, that's a good question. Is using terrible analogies a requirement to being a sheikh? I don't know if it's written anywhere in the Hadith or in the Quran, but I would venture to say that it is, because oh my God, I can't wait to make the next video, now even more, where I talk about how I had several conversations with 5 sheikhs in the span of 2 hours over 2 days, and they had the worst analogies I've ever heard in my life, ever. But yeah, this guy's saying your desperation, like God owns your wealth if you're poor. God owns your happiness if you're depressed, and that keeps you focused on worshiping God. It seems like a negative feedback loop, that the more desperate you are, the more focused you are on seeking help from God.
But we are more interested in good food than we are in paradise, in Jannah, subhanallah. So a mu'mina, she is different by the fact that she is focused upon paradise. She will try to achieve whatever she can in the dunya in terms of facilitating this life and making...
Okay. Let's pause there. We're focused too much on good food and not enough on heaven. What was promised in heaven? I mean, when you look at the things promised in the Quran and the Hadith, it's gardens, it's mansions, it's heavenly sex maiden for men, it's servants, little servant boys. Because again, that's so weird. I don't think there's anything sexual about it in particular, but it's just weird that in heaven you would want a little human child, or what looks like a human child, to serve you, because you're that attached to the idea of slave ownership or being a master or being a king. Like heaven in Islam glorifies kings. It's essentially you live like a king. So he's saying we're focused too much on good food in this life and not focused on being a king in the afterlife. Whose fault is that? If anything, I don't think that heaven did justice describing how good life can be. There are people who live lives now that are better than what Muhammad or people thinking of heaven back then could have ever thought of. Like they say, rivers of honey and wine and milk. You can have a fridge, and even if you're rich enough, you can have a servant who stocks that fridge for you, and you have all the variety from all parts of the world. That's more than what heaven even had effectively described. So is it really bad that people are focused on what they can have right now over a promise of maybe someday being as rich as a king in heaven? It's not that deep of a point that you're trying to make.
It's easy for her to live here, but her prime focus is the akhirah. It is the pleasure of Allah. So if she can achieve...
Why does Allah need us to be pleasured? Can't he pleasure himself? Like why is it? And it's not just that. Like, sure, I'll give him a hand, I'll pray to Allah, or 2 hands. I'll pray to Allah to pleasure him if it's like some kind of symbiotic relationship, but not if at the threat of being tortured if I don't pleasure Allah or serve Allah. Why so desperate? Especially when he's capable of being satisfied and content with himself. I don't get it.
The kitchen, while she is pleasing Allah, she will do that.
Hear this.
And making it easy for her to live here, but her prime focus is the akhirah. It is the pleasure of Allah. So if she can achieve the kitchen while she is pleasing Allah, she will do that. If she cannot...
What the hell? If she can achieve the kitchen while she's pleasing Allah. What? So his prime example of what a woman can achieve, or like one of the examples he could think of, is being good at the kitchen or making delicious food, I guess. Is that the point that he was trying to make? Like people focus too much on good food, that if she can be a good chef but also pray enough or also worship Allah enough, then that's good. But if she can't, then she should have lousy cooking. I'm very confused.
The kitchen is by the way, but Allah, the relation with Allah is never by the way.
Like, is that really, isn't that a bit infantilizing, the kitchen? Aren't we, I guess this is 2019, but even in 2019, I feel like the Western world had moved from saying unironically, go back to the kitchen. And he's essentially saying, well, a woman's place is the kitchen. So if she's focused too much on making good food, I think it goes beyond just good food. But yeah, I want to point out this comment, T-Rex again. Mufti Menk doesn't give men crap for getting a degree because making a living is a right. Women jump through hoops because for them, working and education are privileges, not rights. I agree. That is the part that is not said out loud. And yeah, please nobody clip me out of context. That was not intentional. Me when I achieved the kitchen. Oh boy. Okay. Mufti Menk, what if the woman achieves the kitchen?
May Allah protect us all. This is why we say the hadith speaks of focus. إِذَا أَتَاكُمْ مَنْ تَرْضَوْنَ دِينَهُ وَخُلُقَهُ فَزَوِّجُوهُ إِلَّا تَفْعَلُوهُ تَكُنْ فِتْنَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَفَسَادٌ عَرِيضٌ. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, when proposals come for your daughters from those who are of deen and those whose character is acceptable, allow them to be married. If you don't allow them to be married because you focused on something else, in that particular case, there will be fitna and fasad on the earth. And
so the most relevant hadith he could think of while addressing women about how to be a good Muslim woman is a hadith about how you shouldn't judge men by how rich they are. And as long as he's got good religion and good moral character, then your father should let him marry you. What? Bro, read the room. You're talking to a bunch of women, and the best example you could think of at the moment is a hadith about men. That's another weird pick-me thing that has been happening for a while, I guess, where there are Muslim women who go on the internet and say, I don't even want a mahr, a dowry. I don't want a dowry. I just want him to memorize the Quran for me, and that is my dowry. And I mean, I don't believe in the dowry system anymore. I don't think it's really relevant for most of our lives, but it's such a weird thing to just be like, I want him to be so religious, and that is my dowry. They romanticize this stuff too much. I don't think they should. But anyway, what's the relevance of this hadith, Sheikh?
And fasad, corruption and vice, fitna and fasad.
So he's saying if you don't let pious poor men get married, that causes corruption
on the earth. And what is the fitna and fasad? Corruption and vice, chaos and sin. That is what is happening. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us protection.
What is the relevance to women in that room? And also, I want to remind you that the world that he's describing, right, that at the time of Muhammad, you couldn't have premarital sex, or at least Allah didn't allow it. So no premarital relationships, no premarital sex, but you can go get a concubine. You can go buy a concubine. You can go enslave a concubine. You can already own a concubine and have intercourse with her, but you can't have a girlfriend. You can't have premarital relationships. So he's saying there will be corruption if you don't let the poor Muslim, the poor mu'min men get married, the poor, very pious men get married. By corruption, they mean premarital sex, maybe, or what they think of as like extremely, in that case, it would be extremely sexually frustrated men who might do worse things. So maybe the whole system is broken. Maybe you shouldn't be just judging a man by how much devotion he puts into the afterlife. It should be his moral character in general and what he can do for your daughter or whoever is getting married. It shouldn't be how much does he pray.
So we are not saying that look for the poorest person in the dunya. But what we are saying is you can compromise when it comes to wealth. You can compromise when it comes to the type of car you're going to have and the house you're going to live in. But you will not compromise when it comes to the deen, because you are a believing female who is focused upon the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Take it away.
Okay, so that's cute. They're fighting the animals. Okay, he's wrapping up the point here, which is you shouldn't focus on material things. You focus on pleasuring Allah. Why? So that you can avoid hell and go to heaven, where you can get all the material things.
So I normally say that Allah took a soul and put it into your body. So your body has worn the soul. It's the uniform of the soul. One day the body will take out that soul. The soul will come out by the will of Allah. You leave the body and the uniform gone down. You are no longer known by your name, or the body is known as the body after that, not with your name.
What are you on about? Okay, so there's a body, there's a soul, is what he's trying to say. And when you die, you're just going to be known by your soul, not your body.
You know what that means?
No.
Every one of us, when we die, nobody's going to say, "Where's Muhammad?" They will say, "Where is the body? Bring the body here. Is the body at home? Is the body there?" They're not going to say, "Where is Khadija? Bring Fatima here. Bring Abdullah this side here." Or, lower Abdullah into the grave.
This sounds like a one-man podcast, and at the risk of sounding like I am a one-man podcast. But he's not as deep as he thinks he is. Really? What is he saying? When you die, people start referring to it as the body instead of your name. I don't know. I haven't died and witnessed how people refer to my body, but what's the point he's trying to make here?
Nobody ever says that. They say, lower the body into the grave. Bring the body here. Bring the body there. Where is the body? How far is the body? What happened to the body? And so on. Why is it the body? Because the soul is gone. Have you ever thought of that? Well, it is a reality. A believing female focuses on that. So as much as we're interested in Mac and back, at one stage, it's all the body. No longer us. MashaAllah.
Maybe I'm slow, but what the hell did he just say? He's saying when you die, people refer to your body as the body because it's not the soul. And the believing woman focuses on the fact that her soul is not her body and that there's more to life than her body. Is that what he's saying?
This is what makes it believe.
I love the juxtaposition with a kitten playing. Again, just random stock footage of animals and being like, look at what God made. God made kittens, therefore you should listen to this misogynistic religion.
Believing female, different from others. She knows what she wants. She knows the temporary nature of this dunya. She knows the temporary nature of her body and her existence. And she knows that she will change from this particular world to the next in a different existence altogether, which means
But the man, again, I don't know what context this is where he's also not talking about men, but shouldn't the Muslim men know the same thing?
another place altogether by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For who? Ma'siyatul asin. The good deeds.
Why did they cut off that Arabic part?
Of those who do good, they don't help Allah. And the bad deeds of those who do bad do not harm Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's for us. This is us. It's all about us. Subhanallah, it will help.
I hate this gaslighting. I swear. They're like, God doesn't care. God's not offended. It doesn't hurt God. It's for you. But, okay, forget the sin where, like, me physically harming or, like, emotionally harming another person. Say the sin of skipping a prayer or the sin of not fasting. Whatever, a sin that doesn't actually hurt anyone. It's just something I'm supposed to do Islamically and I don't do. Say that's the sin that I commit and it doesn't hurt Allah, but then the Sheikh says it hurts you. How does it hurt me? Because Allah will punish me for it. So Allah doesn't care, but he's punishing me for it anyway. It's like an abuser who says, look at what you made me do. Like when, and I hope a lot of you are not familiar with the situation, but some of you might be. When you have someone who's abusive, they harm you physically or otherwise, and then they say, look at what you made me do. I am not like this. This is because of what you did. That is what Allah sounds like. So he's not offended, he's not hurt, he's not upset by things, but he will punish you for it. And then he will say, look at what you did to yourself. This is for your own good. This hurts me more than it hurts you. Yeah.
me or it will harm me. So I better be focused, and I have a beautiful way out at Tawbah. I can turn to Allah at any time and say, Allah, forgive me, let me gain focus again. You know what? This might be my last few days in this dunya. It may be.
This might be my last few days on this earth is such an anxiety that some believers have, that I used to have. Like, what if I die now? What if a bus hits me right now? What if I just don't wake up? Am I ready to go and, face God and be literally naked in front of God and humanity and be told every bad thing I've ever done in my life? Am I ready for that? No one's ever ready for that. So why do we have to live a life of constant anxiety and also hope that God will forgive us and just turning to God and groveling in front of God? Why? Is that a merciful existence? Like, would God want that for us? If you have a son or daughter and you love them, would you want that for them? But you're only human. You can't dictate how they feel. You can't dictate how they grow up. But as a God, you get to decide what the parameters of this world are, what the torture is going to be like, whether there's going to be any torture at all. So you don't get to be a God who creates this entire system and then call yourself merciful when you put us in anxiety and fear all the time. And I'm talking to this hypothetical God. I don't believe that God exists. But he's just saying a good Muslim woman is always in fear of, am I ready to die? Am I ready to face God?
Be my last few days in the dunya. So it's important for us to understand the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Something else that makes her different is that she believes firmly in the taqdeer and the destiny that Allah, the decree of Allah that He has chosen for her. Sometimes we make a lot of dua and Allah does not want to give us something. We are convinced that that was the best thing that could have happened. That is a believing female.
Okay, that's a couple of different points here. Is that you have to believe in destiny and that Allah chooses. Wait, what did he say?
Is that she believes firmly in the taqdeer and the destiny that Allah, the decree of Allah that He has chosen for her. Sometimes we make a lot of dua and Allah does not want to give us something.
So this is the dual nature of prayer. This is not just exclusive to Islam, but it is, something that he says here. If you pray for something, trivial or major or whatever it might be, Allah, please cure me from this disease, or Allah, please get me a Rolls Royce, whatever it might be. And if it then happens, not even magically, if then things in your life happen or you work hard and you make it happen, or it falls into your lap, whatever way that it happens, a believer will point to that and say, see, my prayer was answered. Allah did this. If it doesn't happen, a believer is supposed to point at this and say, that doesn't disprove that God isn't real. It just means that God is holding out for something better, or that this not happening is actually the best scenario for me. And that might be true, but it's so unfalsifiable. How do you test any of that? So you're supposed to believe that no matter what the outcome is, the experiment proves that God is real, or God is real despite what happens. So yeah, that's why he's saying a good Muslim woman believes that whether her prayer is answered or not, God exists.
We are convinced that that was the best thing that could have happened. That is a believing female. May Allah grant us all shifa and cure. Sometimes we have a disease and Allah says, I don't want you to be cured from this because I want you to die in a condition that you are the closest to me. So die with a smile, thanking Allah. Ya Allah, you made me sick. I made tawbah. I thanked you. I'm really concerned about going into the akhirah. But Ya Allah, my last few days were the best because I constantly made tawbah. You gave me such a chance. I'm far better.
I don't know how to feel about this one. So if you manage to convince someone on their deathbed or suffering from a debilitating disease that it's actually all good and this is going to be good, even if nothing comes afterwards, even if, they die and they cease to exist, is that good enough? Like, as long as they have some hope before they die, should we just let them have the false hope? I don't necessarily have a problem with that in particular, but to condition people before that situation even happens to always think that bad things are good for me because it brings me closer to God. Good things are possibly bad for me because they keep me away from God, or good things might be a distraction from the afterlife or from God, or good things might be good things from God. To think of everything as something that has to do with God, it makes it difficult for people to actually just know how to think without considering God as part of the plot. And that's something that people struggle with even after leaving religion. They start thinking in superstitious ways or continue thinking in superstitious ways. Like, do I have a disease, or am I suffering at work because I deserve it? Because this is what God wants from me? Because this is universal karma? Because of something? Sometimes there is no because. Things just are. And this is kind of training people to think whatever happens, it's because God and it's good. And no, sometimes suffering is just bad. And some people might even prolong their suffering or continue to have suffering because they think this is good. This is saving me from God's wrath in the afterlife. This is making me pray harder. There are even hadiths about how when you're suffering, it's kind of like washing away your sins, or God is testing you, or something of that nature. So it might develop a sort of counterintuitive masochism, for wanting to suffer because it's good for you.
Than one who just died suddenly in a huge car crash and had no chance to engage in tawbah. Wasn't that Allah's gift for you? So when we get to the akhirah, we are convinced that, Ya Allah, you gave me such a powerful gift to be able to get to a sickness which brought me closer to you. Sometimes you lose a child, sometimes you lose a family member, sometimes you go through a divorce, sometimes you go through some form of difficulty, sickness, financial loss, marital turbulence, whatever else you're going through, a child who's not obedient, whatever else. Allah says, that is for you to get closer to me. If that brought you closer to Allah, it was a gift of Allah upon you. That's what we are focused on. That's what we know, that's what we realize. Because this is why we are brought closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through difficulty and calamity. And like I say, we make dua with conviction, but we are also convinced that if we don't receive what we are asking for, that too was the best. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ فَإِنَّ أَمْرَهُ كُلَّهُ لَهُ خَيْرٌ. The Prophet ﷺ says, amazing are the affairs of a true believer. All his matters are always full of goodness. All of them. He's never upset. In أصابته سراء شكر فكان خيرا له. When goodness comes in his direction, he is thankful to Allah.
So this true believer or ideal believer that the hadith describes, of a person who's just gleeful about, or content with bad and good, that's not really human. Like that's not how humans operate, and that's not healthy to sort of try to force yourself into that ideal. If you're going through something bad, it's okay to feel the struggle. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel like I don't know where I'm going to go from here. It's, in my opinion, it's not okay to automatically think this is good, this is great. Actually, this must be good for me somehow. This is how God is taking care of me in the afterlife, or this is going to maybe, bring me closer to heaven and further away from hell. That is an unhealthy reaction to tragedy. So I'm not saying you should, stay in your suffering forever, but don't try to seek an ideal where you're responding in an inhumane, paradoxical way, where you're supposed to be happy when you're sad and happy but cautious when you're happy.
It was better for him because it brought him close to Allah. How many of us, when goodness comes to us, we draw closer to Allah? If we don't, we are not true mu'mineen, because the hadith says, لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. And believe me, I'm a counselor. I know what I'm talking about. It comes back to haunt you, because everything that's rosy, the clubs and the nightclubs and the...
Wait. Before he gets to that, this bothers me so much. So he says he's a counselor. I'm assuming a licensed mental health professional. And he says, believe me. He uses that as sort of, appeal to authority. Like, I studied this stuff. I know what I'm talking about. And his answer to mental health problems is trust that it's for a good reason, that this is bringing you closer to God. You don't know shit about mental health. Like, no. Whatever you studied, apparently you didn't really quite learn how to apply, because you can't just say, I studied this stuff. I took secular degrees. I got a degree in this, and something that has nothing to do with Islam. And that gives me credibility to say that it really works, guys. When you pray harder, depression goes away. That's not exactly what he said, but it's sort of what he's insinuating, that a good believer, a true believer, is happy when bad things happen because it brings them closer to God. They should revoke your license, whatever license you have to practice. And he says it's not all rosy. What is he talking about with clubbing?
It says, لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. And believe me, I'm a counselor. I know what I'm talking about. It comes back to haunt you because everything that's rosy, the clubs and the nightclubs and the glamour and the nightlife and the parties, people are.
Is that what, like, the dichotomy with these sheikhs is always either I sleep around and go clubbing every night and like drink and do drugs, or I'm pious and I love God and stuff. There is no in between. So he's saying, trust me, I know this because I'm a counselor. Even clubbing is going to haunt you someday. How does your experience as a counselor, what you learned, say anything about that? And why is that where your mind goes? That's a good question. Secular Spirit is asking, has Mufti Menk even tried clubbing? Judging what he hasn't even tried, you're being sarcastic, but it's, yeah. Emil Murr says, I'm actually in the club while watching this stream. I'm surprised you can hear anything, but have fun.
Are focused on parties. Come Friday night, they're at a party. What party? Well, we went to a party, we had fun and we danced and we had music and everything else. What happened? You're not focused on the akhirah, not at all.
How did we get to this party? And notice how his point isn't that you go to a party, dangerous things might happen, or you might meet some bad people, or you might be lonely afterwards because you're not actually socializing in a healthy way. He didn't say any of that. He says the danger, you might be having fun, you might go home happy, but the danger is that you're not focused on the afterlife, on the akhirah, on the eternal afterlife. And okay, let's for a second look at this from an outsider's perspective. He's saying, I don't care that what you're doing right now is giving you a good time and making you happy. Are you thinking about the eternal horror of the afterlife? Why would someone be in eternal horror in the afterlife if they're doing something that makes them happy and isn't hurting them or other people? And this is not me advocating for a clubbing every Friday lifestyle, but the comparison here isn't that you did something bad or harmful, is that God doesn't like it and you lost focus of the fact that God doesn't like it. So he's trying to remind us, even if you're happy right now, you should be terrified. You shouldn't be happy. That's sad. He's not talking to someone who feels empty because of their over partying or who has been harmed because of partying. He's talking to someone who's even enjoying it and says, but you should be scared. You lost focus. You should focus on the fear of the afterlife. And I resent that. It's sad that we allow people, no matter what the religion, to instill us with ideas and fear and anxiety about something that nobody has ever witnessed and nobody ever will, the afterlife. So he's saying, don't go clubbing because you lose focus of hell.
Did that party help you at all? No. What, do you want me to sit and read the Quran on a Friday night? Allahu Akbar. What an answer. What an answer. No.
These weird hypotheticals that he has with himself, like they always have to set up some kind of hypothetical scenario. So he's arguing with someone and the person's like, no, I want to go clubbing, Dad. I don't want to read the Quran.
May Allah grant us goodness. How can you leave the home in the morning without having read one verse of the Quran? How? But we do.
Okay. Listen to that. How can you leave the house in the morning without having read one verse of Quran? When I tell you, some people don't realize how obsessed you can and ideally should be with Islam if you're a Muslim. People really don't get that. Some Christians might be watching and you don't understand possibly the level of obsession that you need to achieve to maybe start to feel safe in Islam. Imagine leaving the house without reading a verse of Quran. How dare you do that? Like, this sheikh is painting it as if that is a terrible tragedy, because you might die, and you might face God and have to answer for the fact that you haven't kissed his ass for the past 3 hours. How terrible is that? What kind of God do you worship where if you don't mention him for a few hours, that's bad for you? How clingy, how needy, how desperate is that God? I mean, if you want to, get extra points by reading Quran, that's fine. But to scare people to think that if you don't do it obsessively every few hours, there's something wrong with you and that's what you should strive to do, that is not healthy.
What did I say? One verse of the Quran. I challenge you. Do you want to make a change in your life? Before you leave the home every morning, please, can we promise one verse of the Quran? Let's put up our hands. The last point I would like to...
That's a good point. So a comment, Emil Mer says, from the club apparently, I used to read one verse after every prayer. After Fajr, I'd read a verse and go to work. Usually the verse would be something about burning in hell. So that was always a great way to start my day. So I made a couple of videos about how I wanted to practice Islam for a couple of weeks, and I did. And that's something that I was reminded of because I hadn't been reading the Quran regularly in a while, obviously, because I don't need to. But when I converted back to Islam, when I practiced for a couple of weeks, I wanted to read different chapters every time that I would pray. So it doesn't get boring and repetitive. It was still boring and repetitive. And I again was reminded of how much there is mention of torture and the afterlife and hell on every single page, pretty much, of the Quran. So, yeah, should I read the verse about torture, or should I read the verse about Muhammad asking for something that works only in his favor and will never be applicable ever again? How is that going to benefit me in my life, except to, brainwash me and remind me that you have to think in a certain way, you have to be guilty in a certain way, you have to be fearful in a certain way. So the daily reminders or the morning reminders would help with that goal. Yes.
To mention this evening. What makes her different is that she is not enslaved by the adverse environment around her. I touched on this at the beginning. Let me say it again. She is not enslaved by brand names, by trends. Imagine you have a trend. People are doing things, so we all want to do that. Everyone has their hair. It comes down to...
Again, this guy probably wears fancy clothes. He probably doesn't wear no name stuff, I'm assuming, but this speech is directed towards women because only women wear brand names. As we know, Middle Eastern and Arab and Muslim men don't care about brands at all, or trends. It's just the women. And it's funny that he uses the word enslaved because, yeah, you can make analogies about capitalism and, marketing and social media and slavery or mental slavery, but he's talking to women who are closer to, actual slavery than anything that he just described, women in Islam. I mean, you can't leave your house without your husband's permission. I'm not saying that most Muslim husbands use that right, but it is a right that a Muslim husband has over his wife. You can literally own a woman in Islam or a man. So it's weird that he's talking about mental slavery as if that's something as if slavery itself is bad. Slavery is okay in Islam, just in particular contexts, and not okay when it comes to fashion.
To the front, and it's painted pink. So everyone has to paint it pink. Why? Because that's what Beyonce did. Allahu Akbar. May Allah protect us. If that is the system of operation, we've lost focus. So what makes her different is she is original. That's what makes her different. She is original. She is herself. She knows I'm a believer. I owe my life and my existence to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Again, there's half of a good message there, which is, be original, be based, be yourself. What is yourself? You owe everything to God. You think about God all the time. You mention God in the morning and you fear God taking you to hell. That's what a good Muslim woman is.
I don't owe it to the trends around me that are un-Islamic. If there is a good trend of people who are reading the Quran, people who are engaging in halaqat and engaging in different forms of learning and getting closer to Allah, then that is a brilliant trend, mashallah. But we're talking of the evil trends around us. A believing woman is never ever enslaved by the trends. Rather, she is original. She remains on the same thing no matter what. The world can come up with all sorts of things. Do you know, if you take a look at the shoes, subhanallah, may Allah protect us. A lot of women are guilty of focusing on shoes. So when you open the cupboard, you have 45 pairs of shoes. You have the...
You can't make this up. This guy's like the kitchen this and the shoes that and the trends that. Have you met women outside of what, as someone told me in the Discord server, we were watching this video earlier this week, and someone mentioned this sounds like this sounds like a lot of what the husbands were relaying to him. Like a lot of men were complaining to him, like, my wife, she buys too many shoes. My wife, she does too much shopping, which again, I remind you, a culture where the woman is supposed to be a queen and she sits at home and does nothing except, get paid to be a woman and do the house chores. And if they, if they're rich and they have servants and stuff, she doesn't even do that. So you got a person who that's their entire life, and then you have the men complaining about their wives, and then the sheikh is like, okay, I'm going to incorporate this into my lecture, which is funny because that has happened before, where there was a hadith about like the husbands complaining to Muhammad and saying, ever since you said like we can't beat our wives, they have been too bold. And then Muhammad had that verse where he says men are dominant over women, which we're going to go over in a second. He says you can beat your wives. And then his wife Aisha went to him and said, the women are complaining to me. So I guess community input is always relevant. And I have a feeling that this is a lot of the his nagging, or like his men buddies nagging to him about what their wives are nagging about. Shoes, apparently.
Clogs and the court shoes, and you have the high heels and the slops and the sandals and so on. Pink and green and orange and purple and mauve. Like I say, I don't even know what color that is. I just heard it.
Okay. Yeah, so that was that. Let me read a couple of comments, and then I'll go over a couple of hadiths just to wrap this up and remind you of the parts that he doesn't explicitly say. Kikno, thank you so much for the super chat. Says, I can't remember the last time reading the Quran helped me in any way, but going out with friends as always decompresses me. Yeah, and there are people out there who reading the Quran might actually help them relax. I just find that very difficult when you understand what is in it, but there can be a sort of rhythm or a ritual to it that might make someone relax. As someone who understood what I was reading, it was very difficult for me to ever relax. So if you don't understand what the Quran is and it helps you relax, more power to you. You're lucky. Unfortunately, I do understand what it means. Okay, so let's read. I don't know, where do we begin? We begin with this hadith right here. Let's show it on screen. This is a hadith, Mishkat al-Misbah. It is the book of marriage, Kitab al-Nikah, the chapter of the treatment of wives and the rights of each. Anas reported God's messenger as saying, when a woman observes the 5 times of prayer, fasts during Ramadan, preserves her chastity, and obeys her husband, she may enter by any of the gates of paradise as she wishes, as a way of saying nothing will prevent her from entering paradise. I mean, first of all, the Islamic lore is so discombobulated. It's so messy that you'll find hadith saying you enter through here, and hadith saying, well, no, you go through this stage first. And you don't know if it's actually all coherent or not. But apparently here he's speaking metaphorically. It doesn't mean that she enters heaven right away. It means that, barring God's judgment, sending her to hell, she's going to heaven. But my question here would be, like, why the emphasis on obeying her husband, preserving her chastity? So he didn't say a hadith like this, like when a man observes the 5 times of prayer, fasts during Ramadan, preserves his chastity, and obeys his wife, he may enter by any of the gates of paradise as he wishes. What? So say a woman, this is an interesting question. Say a woman did a lot of good deeds, but missed one of these criteria right here. Say doesn't obey her husband, right? Are we to conclude that she may not enter by any of the gates of paradise as she wishes? So because she's doesn't obey her husband, she goes to hell? Are you saying that Allah can judge that a woman is worthy of going to heaven, and then her husband says, well, no, she disobeyed me, so God's like, I have no say in this. You disobeyed him. Or are you saying that God would not let you go to heaven unless you obey your husband? Is that what Allah is saying, or Muhammad is saying? So clearly there's a lot of, I don't know what even to call it, messages, language, loaded language that's implying or explicitly saying women should obey their husbands. So then you listen to Mufti Menk, sounds kind of progressive, saying, well, no, there's reasons women can have careers and men's preferences vary. Now do you understand that his answer is a non-answer? He's not saying you have the right to work as a woman and your husband shouldn't get in the way of that, or your husband should be supportive of that. He's saying your husband has the last say. I hope that you find someone who's compatible with you, because men have different preferences. But at the end of the day, if you happen to be in a situation where you're married to that person out of desperation or obligation, or because you chose it, you have no way out of it. That's it. You have to then ask for a divorce if you're not happy with the way that your life is going. Your husband has no obligation to let you go to work or to even let you leave the house, such as we're going to see in a minute. So again, I ask you, everyone, why would God, the God that created everything, matter itself, the concept of time, God created all that, waited, or, God is beyond time, but from our perspective, waited for billions of years for everything to form, for life to form, for evolution, which is a mechanism that supposedly God put in there, for the great flood, where Noah saved, every species on earth, for all of these events, just for the last messenger to say, by the way, women, you have to cover up your hair and you have to obey your husband, otherwise you're not going to heaven. Does that make any sense to you? And does that sound like a progressive feminist religion, or a religion made by a God that is not a man? Or is it more likely that these are the words of man, a human male? I'll let you be the judge of that. There are so many hadiths that are terrible to women, but we're not going to go through all of them today. Like one about how the majority of the inhabitants of hell are women, but that's for another day. Let's look at this verse, 434, Surah An-Nisa, the one chapter that is supposed to be sort of addressed at women, but it's actually talking to men about their women. It's called The Women. That's the name of the chapter. The verse starts with الرجال قوامون على النساء بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض وبما أنفقوا من أموالهم. Men are dominant over women. The English translation says are protectors of or maintainers of, but it's still some sort of infantilizing position over women by what God has given some of them over the others. Let me go back to the literal translation for that. I messed up the website. We'll go back to that in a second. Oh, there we go. Protectors and maintainers of women. Man is responsible for the woman as if she's a child. And caretaker and leader who disciplines her if she deviates. I'm not making this up. This is what the exegesis is. This is in the Quran itself. A man is supposed to discipline his wife if she deviates. From what? From the way of God, from the way of her husband. بما فضل الله بعضهم على بعض, because Allah has made one of them to excel over the other. Who is the one who's excelling? I mean, I think that's obvious, the man. Meaning because men excel over women and are better than them for certain tasks. Again, with the certain task stuff, we're not talking about who can carry more lumber. We're talking about who gets to decide and make the shots and who is dominant over who. This is why prophethood was exclusive of men, as well as other important positions of leadership. It's interesting that they chose to put this in the tafsir from Ibn Kathir. Well, Ibn Kathir chose to put this. He says, the Prophet even said in this hadith, لَنْ يَفْلَحَ قَوْمٌ وَلَّوْ أَمْرَهُمْ إِمْرَأَةً. Sorry, I forgot that the text isn't large enough. The people who appoint a woman to be their leader will never achieve success. Plenty of countries that have women in leadership would beg to differ. I mean, they would just differ. Anyway, going back to the verse, it says, وَبِمَا أَنْفَقُوا مِنْ أَمْوَالِهِمْ. So men are dominant over women because of the qualities in which they excel over women and because of what they spent from their money. Remember what I said earlier? When you're told that in Islam a woman has rights and the rights are that she's provided for, that's just a control mechanism. If Allah himself says, supposedly, when your husband provides for you, then he gets to call the shots because he spent money, because he excels over you. What are you supposed to believe out of that? Do you really believe Mufti Menk saying that it's all good, the world is diverse and people like different things, or men have different preferences? So the answer to why are there some men, or a lot of Muslim men, who are negative towards their woman having, or their wife having, a career, it's because that's how they're primed to think. It's because that's what the religion kind of primes them to to do. So we don't get to point at the exceptions and say, well, some people are progressive. Sure, but what is the religion actually priming them to think? Also, I wanted to point out, thanks, someone just donated 5 memberships. I am not your sister. Thank you so much for that. That's very generous of you. Emil Murr from the club again says, just want to thank you for the stimulating discussions and dissections, Aladdin. Hope you're doing all right. Please take care of yourself. These videos have helped me immensely. Thanks again. I really appreciate it. Yeah, that's so kind of you. It's nice to be back. I haven't done this in a while, and I hope that this live stream isn't going on for too long. I guess I'll wrap it up soon. But yeah, this I agree. This second shaitan, this is making me angry. So I'll just make this the last hadith that we read together. So it's from Sahih al-Bukhari, the book of wedlock and marriage, chapter, the woman is a guardian in her husband's house. And I want to point out the language of that. The Prophet said, all of you are guardians and are responsible for your wards. A ruler, or the ruler, is a guardian, and the man is a guardian of his family. What is he talking about? The lady is a guardian and is responsible for her husband's house and his offspring. Notice that wording. And so all of you are guardians and are responsible for your wards. So the lady is a guardian. The lady's is a guardian over her husband's house and her husband's offspring. It's not even their house and their offspring. Forget joint custody. It's the husband's house and the husband's offspring. So where did the offspring come from? From the husband's sperm and the wife's eggs. But Muhammad seems to neglect that second part. I think that this may seem like I'm being nitpicky. It feels a bit silly, but I think it's very indicative. If the Prophet himself is talking about how the house and the offspring belong to the man, even in passing, that should tell you that he really did not see men and women as equal in any way. Allah himself, supposedly talking through a prophet, said that no, they're not equal. The men are dominant over them because they excel in certain ways. So I guess to wrap this up, what I want to remind you of again is not that my point here is not every Muslim thinks this way all the time, or that there is no such thing as Muslim women who work. I am very familiar with family members who have worked since before I've even gained consciousness. So it does happen, especially in today's world, that people need dual income, people need to work. But at the end of the day, if a Muslim husband were to decide, no, my wife cannot work, or my wife cannot leave the house. Fuck, I forgot to line up that hadith. I want to point that out before I leave, because there's this answer on Islam QA. It's not exclusive to Islam QA, but we'll just go through it from here. Can the wife go out without the husband's permission in Islam? And the summary of the answer is, it is prohibited for a woman to go out of the house without the husband's permission, except in cases of necessity or Sharia obligations. With regard to a woman traveling without a mahram, this is also prohibited. So if we're going by the book, even if there was an example here of like, I don't want to go through the whole thing right now, but here's a part that I wanted to highlight. The married woman should remember that obedience to her husband takes precedence over obedience to her parents. Even that. A man should not give precedence to anyone over his mother with regard to kind treatment, and a woman should not give precedence to anyone over her husband with regard to obedience. Do they mention anything about the wife having to obey her husband? No, they don't. So anyway, I'll leave the links in the description if you want to go through it yourself. Point is, what worries me isn't just that, every Muslim is in this situation, but there are a lot of Muslim women who are or will be in that situation, especially if you willingly walk into it not knowing what you're going to expect. And they don't really have an avenue out unless they can go to a legal system that is not based on the Islamic legal system, and unless they don't fear their husbands or the men in their family, and they can actually take legal action, which is very difficult, even in Western countries. A woman usually has no avenues except to say, well, if that's what God wants, if that's what God ordained, then who am I to disagree? So no matter how progressive a sheikh sounds like, no matter how nice his answer, intellectual his answer may sound, at the end of the day, peel the layers, listen to what he's saying, look at the text that he's supposed to be pointing to, and come to your own conclusion. My conclusion is that this religion and many other religions were made by men for men. So no, in Islam, a woman cannot have a career if her husband decides she cannot have it. It's not like how Mufti Menk said that it's a discussion and it goes both ways. At the end of the day, when the hammer comes down, what Allah said is that a woman must be obedient to her husband. I think I've said most of what I wanted to say about these videos. Let me know if you'd like to join for next week's Wednesday live stream. As usual, I'm going to start to have the brainstorming sessions on the weekend. So Saturdays, I'm going to decide on the next live stream topic, and I'll also make some videos in between. So thank you everyone for tuning in. It's been fun. It's nice to be back. And yeah, comment your favorite timestamps below, like, subscribe, hit the notification button for more. And a special thank you to the patrons and YouTube members and donors for making this happen. If I can find, there we go. I haven't updated this in a while. I will do that soon. Thank you everyone for your support. I really could not do this without you. And as always, think critically and think for yourself, and consider watching one of these videos next.